So thank you guys for joining us. And we're going to get started slowly but surely. My name is Naomi. I'm the head of marketing here at Alvéole, and today I am very pleased to be hosting a conversation on how sustainability becomes a people experience, or how we can leverage green buildings certifications to make tenants, community occupiers happier. One thing that struck with me is when I first started speaking with both Ryan and Stephen, there's this one thing that we were discussing, that was how sustainability features can only deliver ROI if the building community actually feel and engage with them. It's becoming more and more important. And in fact, the gap between a building green certification and a tenant experience, or what their experience on site, is really where a retention can be won or can be lost. Today's conversation brings two amazing practitioners, I should say, who have seen and experienced this gap in a different angle, and who have found ways to close it. I am pleased to introduce you to our two guests who complement each other very naturally. Stephen Ward comes to us from Southface Institute. It's a nonprofit that has spent over 4 decades advancing sustainable buildings practices across the Southeast in Atlanta through technical expertise, education, and advocacy. Stephen will be our practitioner in the room today. So for everyone joining us, either you're overseeing a building, you're a facility manager. So what does a truly sustainable building actually looks and feels like on the ground from a design and also an advocacy perspective? And then Ryan's now on the opposite side, or I should say sitting also with us on this side, represent US Green Building Council. It is the organization behind LEED, and a global force as well too in transforming how buildings are designed, built, and also operated for the people and the planet. Ryan will bring with us today the framework plan, so how LEED and green leases standards actually account for the tenant experience, and where is that conversation basically heading in the future. So to both of you, welcome, and let's get this conversation started. Yeah, I feel like you guys are excited. We've had conversations before, so is there anything that we should kick off with Ryan and Stephen? Any thoughts before we get started?
I'm just excited to see some of the folks in the room. I definitely see a lot of our Atlanta friends, which is great as well. So thank you so much for bringing us together. Stephen and I oftentimes will coordinate what we're wearing on these things. So this has happened before. So when you say we complement each other, we do in many ways. So thank you so much for bringing us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love, as I mentioned, that you guys, Ryan, you're bringing the certification like lens, and Stephen is bringing the experience, on-field experience. So it's going to be a great mix. And we're going to get started on what the expectation, I will say, from occupiers, building community, or tenants, and what they want today. And Ryan, I'm going to get started with you, especially on LEED V5. We've seen that it has put now a greater emphasis on the occupant experience. Excuse me. Can you walk us through what it looks like in practice, especially around green leases, credit and well-being as well? I see that now there's 25%, if I'm not mistaken, that is going to be around well-being. So I'm very curious to hear you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our favorite topics here at USGBC is LEED V5, which came out just about a year ago. And just to back up, health and well-being has always kind of been intrinsic within LEED. Particularly when you look at things like indoor environmental quality, but that sounds, a little academic perhaps. So not everybody translates it in their head as health. In fact, oftentimes when I speak about green building, one of the very first things I always say is that buildings only exist for one reason, and that's for people, right? Like we don't build buildings unless we're building them for people, right? So people are always inherent in buildings, or they should be inherent in everything that we do about buildings. And in some of my favorite stories from green buildings and LEED certified buildings have really been about the impacts that they've had on people and health, especially when looking at things like schools or buildings or facilities that are housing people maybe with health challenges or hospitals and things like that. There's an early LEED building that I was involved with, a really early one. There was actually a convent that they renovated, and the average age of the residents was about 70 years old. And there was one sister who had been on an oxygen tank for years. And when she moved back into this LEED certified building, she actually was able to get off the oxygen, right? So, like, there are so many great stories about health and well-being and the impacts of space on people just over the history of green building that I love. But what we've done in LEED version 5 is make those connections between people and the built environment a lot more explicit, I would say.
Mhm.
So there are three different impact areas in LEED that drove the development of the rating system, and one of those is quality of life. And so it's even, I'd say, beyond just health and well-being. It's quality of life. It's how do we feel in these spaces? So it's, what is the impacts on people? What is the impacts on health? And also resilience, resilience of the spaces themselves from a physical perspective, but the resilience of how that space responds to the people in it in a much stronger way. So when you look at LEED version 5, there are some things that this new version requires you to do. One is a human impact assessment, and the other is a climate resilience assessment. And so with those, we're saying, well, let's look at what is the impact of this building on people, not just the people who are in the building, but the people who helped to build the building, the people that are in the supply chain making the products that go into the building, the people who are in the community surrounding that building. And what are the potential impacts that development can have on those people? And the other one is, of course, what are the biggest threats to that building and the occupants in that from a resilience or climate resilience perspective? And so, even though we're not necessarily saying as a requirement that you have to do anything about that, it's that idea that once you start to think about people and you think about the responsiveness of that space, you kind of naturally are going to do more to make those spaces better, right? Now, of course, there's credits that build upon that and kind of take it further. So we see some new credits in there, like an equitable development credit, which looks at where it is and how it's, that development is impacting the community. There's a new credit for accessibility and inclusion. And then taking the resilience a step further beyond the external parts of the building, looking at the interior spaces and how do you respond? Let's say there's a forest fire or something externally, or even perhaps biological threats that could impact that building. How do you protect the people inside of it, right? So these are some of the new strategies and credits and cool things that are in LEED version 5. But really, when you talk about green leases and things like that, that comes into play in the core and shell developments. And when they use LEED, we have, of course, green design and construction guidelines that help to kind of guide any tenant fit outs that are in there so that the ethic of the building itself, the green goals and standards and things that are there for the core and shell are then more easily integrated into the interiors fit outs. And then there's the tenant green guidelines. So really trying to create a more comprehensive way of looking at the building, knowing that there are different players that come in and like somebody's doing this floor and somebody's doing these floors. We want to kind of keep that health and well-being intact, and of course, building performance across those spaces. So, just to kind of summarize, quality of life is one of those core areas that we try to impact in LEED version 5. And I would say that even if you know LEED from the past, I would really encourage folks who haven't looked at it to look at this brand new version because there's a lot of really cool stuff, and I'll tease some of those out a little bit later. We're really proud of the work that's been done on that, particularly to amplify the impacts on people. And just really quickly, this is coming out of, we have not put out a new version of LEED for a while. And you think about all of the things that have happened, particularly during the pandemic, we're seeing those because the marketplace is telling us we need to address these in our built environment. So people not only are the focus of what we do with LEED, but it's people and their voice that help to create it. Folks like Stephen, actually, who is on our committees. So that's that's a bit of a flavor, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
That's great. I was listening to you and I was wondering where do the inspiration kind of comes from to design, like not as French, like where is the data basically coming from when you're about to design a V5 of a lead certification and everything. So
Yeah, I just talk really quickly. Lead is developed for the market by the market. So
mhm,
very early on, we held lots, hundreds and hundreds of people across the country and across the world, even digitally. We brought them together to say, what are the biggest pressing issues that we want to address in this version of LEAD? And those three impact areas of quality of life, ecological conservation and restoration and decarbonization rose as the three kind of primary things. And we literally had people like maybe not super scientific, like raise their hand and say, how much should we focus on this? And that's kind of what drove the development. There's a lot more behind the
I'm
scenes, but
sure, I'm sure.
it was literally feedback from people in the market.
And from your story, the thing that I can relate to is in the market where we are, where or in the economy where we are is tenants or even companies will look at buildings and they're looking for more. They're looking for a building that knows how to differentiate itself from from the mass and spaces, beautiful spaces, amenities are one thing, but then the quality of life is also something else. And when you're able to prove that and to showcase that to let's say during building tours or even during even with existing community on site, it's even greater. And now to Stefan, because I'm curious to hear on the other side. um, how do you experience this, Stephen, sorry, in your community at Southface, or in Atlanta in general? Um, you know, what does it look like from when it's working, when sustainability working, and when Lead V5 or when well-being is working in a building?
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Ryan, for for calling me out. So please don't send me any hate mail. Yes, I was on the consensus committee, but I assure you that it is a beautiful version. So I was fortunate enough to be able to serve on that committee. But yeah, for buildings in Atlanta and across the Southeast, we're just finding ways. They're certainly finding ways to make sustainability more tangible for the people inside them. And so the projects that kind of come to mind are the ones that most or that resonate the most, and to be the ones that translate sustainability from infrastructure, which can sometimes feel abstract,
Mhm.
into more everyday experience. And so the moment sustainability becomes kind of visible and understandable and participatory, that's when engagement really starts to change. And so to your question, kind of what's working well, and when kind of sustainability stops feeling like something happening behind the scenes and really starts becoming part of daily experiences for building occupants. And so that can show up in a number of different ways. So like, better indoor air quality, real-time dashboards, access to nature or pollinator spaces like the beehives we have here at Southface. But like those features start to become conversation starters that tend to make sustainability feel more visible and more relatable and human. And so ultimately, the buildings where sustainability resonates the most are usually the ones that help people feel like they're not just occupying a high performing building, but they're actively contributing to it.
Aw, that's great. I can feel the not the pressure, but the ecosystem between the occupants of the building, the lead certification investor, whoever is behind this building, and also how you manage it and how you have to comply to all those requirements, because tenants have or occupants have them, but also sometimes investors and owners of them, and then you have to report on those results and on those sustainability initiatives as well too. Um, all right, moving on to, and I'm sure one of the questions we got the most from our audience here is, um, what's broken and what's the path moving forward, or like how, what does the path forward looks like whenever we talk about experience and nature, biodiversity, well-being. It's not always something easy to implement, like a beehive sometimes. But you know, maybe for Ryan, like building occupiers want some transparency in their space, like, in how the space will be performing, where like it's easy when we talk about performance to think about energy, carbons, air quality. But how does the certification framework helps the building communicate that story to the people inside the building? And how do you basically give stories for people to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you walk into a space and you have kind of a guttural reaction, whether that's good or bad, that tells you a lot about the building, right? Like, um, I'll I used to hear from my mom, who, was a school teacher, and she would go into her school and everybody was sick all the time, right? Like, if you don't feel good in your space, you're not going to have good things to say about it. But when you're inspired by that space, when that space feeds back to you, um, positive vibes, for lack of a better word, that certainly, tells the story itself. And I think what's interesting about that is how it translates into kind of the larger real estate market, actually. So, like, we know that, there's all these great benefits of green building. And I kind of think that they're, when we talk about green design or construction operations, the benefits of that are irrefutable, right? Like, we've been hearing about them for years. And that's why lots of corporations and institutions and local governments, for example, are saying, hey, we're going to do green buildings. This is part of what we want, and we're going to incentivize them in our community because we know that they're better for people and they're better for the planet. And when we do things good for the planet, then that also helps people, right? Because we're taking care of our ecology around us. But, one of the parts of your question was, how do certification frameworks like LEED help in this? And so I'm going to dig in a little bit more, because we do hear folks saying a lot like, hey, I'm just going to do all of the things, and why should I actually go through the process of certification? So I think there's an added value to that, right? And that's part of this transparency story, is that first of all, the framework itself gives this kind of shared understanding of what performance means. Like, what does a healthy building mean? What does an efficient building mean? What does a resilient building mean? And everybody's using kind of the same metrics and the same frameworks and the same kind of strategies in one way or another, and able to build upon that. So you're able to move the industry forward, right? And then what this does at a practical level is you have these shared goals that come from the owner or the occupier of that building through the project team, whether it's design or construction, or if you're doing operations and maintenance, through that entire team, you have these kind of shared goals that are translated through the activities that are on this framework. And because you have that framework, there's this opportunity for creativity, right? And creative problem solving in order to achieve these goals that were set, right? So it creates the system which everybody's kind of playing and singing from the same book, if you will. And then in the end, the reason that it's different in the frameworks and the actual certification is different than just doing all the things is that it's a sense of accountability. You have the transparency in what you're trying to do, and it sets accountability for the entire team. So, the easiest way to say this, I just break it down into silly anecdotes, but like, if you've got kids, right, and your kids are like, yeah, I did my homework. Can I go outside and play now? And you're like, well, let me see. Show me the homework. Did you do the homework? And then that homework goes to the teacher, or in the class, you grade the homework to see how you did. Right. And so that's, at the simplest level, that's really what certification does, in addition to just green building. Is it's not just a cool plaque that you put on your building. It's like, great, now we're going to step away. It is transparency. It is showing that you met a higher standard, and then it's actually verified, right? So it holds the entire team accountable, because somebody else is checking and making sure, hey, did you actually do X, Y, Z? Did you meet that goal? And so what we've done in version 5 is continually kind of look back at what is transparency and what are those reporting mechanisms that are out there that you had mentioned, and try to align that across the entire life cycle of the building. So when you talk about things that are broken, in my opinion, the process has been broken a little bit. You've got, owner says I want something, then design, then construction, and then operations and maintenance, and gosh, who knows what happens in between, right? So this is a framework to look across there and continually hold a high level of performance across the life cycle of that building. And so we're actually looking at how does the process of certification and the tools of documenting it help to inform, and then what information can you get out through, say, ongoing performance tracking and new versions of LEED and recertification, so that you're always maintaining a high level of performance, and it's not just a one kind of like snapshot in time of like, hey, we built this thing, great, that was in 2002, what's happening now, right? We want that continuity and transparency and data and feedback along the life of the building to elevate everything that we're there, because we know that things change, things get better, systems get better, expectations become higher. They're certainly higher now. I think in the buildings, because people are like, got to go back to work. Well, I want to be in a good space, right? I'm going to get out of bed for this. So I'm going to leave, the comfort of my home. I want to be in a good space, right? So that's a lot of, I think, what we're looking at. So I know that I didn't directly say, well, what is this? What is this impact on the people inside of there? But I think the bigger picture is that the real estate community and even the investors and the finance community and the insurance community are looking back and saying, we know that these are better buildings because they're better for the people and they're lower risk. And so let's do that. Yeah.
That's the plus value of
Yeah.
LEED being
Yeah.
certified LEED, obviously. Amazing. And do you have any example of or great example that you've seen in the field of, community being built, or like a building really being able to benefit from LEED and from this new LEED V5 certificate?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in the early stages of it now.
Yeah.
So in full transparency, I have not even personally been inside of a LEED V5 building yet because it's so
Yeah.
new. We've just had our first few projects that have certified under it. But just generally, I think that there are so many incredible stories of LEED buildings. And I'll say, we have a small office space. It's an interior fit out that's within a LEED building. And the impact that it has on us as staff. You think, well, we're the USGBC, we must be like, the greenest that are out there, but there's always a learning moment, even for our staff, right? Whether it's on, what can you bring into that space? How do you treat that space? How do you throw things away or not throw things away, reduce garbage? What's your connection to the outside? We're always learning from those spaces. And that's, I think, one of the coolest things that I've seen across the board is like, once you do better, then other people get on board and like, this is cool. Okay, they learn something different. And so there's such an opportunity, I think, for learning and kind of changing of behaviors and mindsets for the occupants that comes about when you tell the story of what's actually happening in that space.
Mhm. And I'd like to turn around to maybe Stephen, in regards to maybe stories from the field, and how does it happen at Southface, Stephen, where you've seen occupants of the building telling the stories, or telling you the stories, or what's been working and what's been wonderful for them, from, because you see it from a certification perspective, but the behind the scene and what basically people have been feeling and telling about a building that is basically certified, and their experience on site.
Sure, yeah, thank you for that question. For us, what the I guess the features and the takeaways that tend to stick the most is just where people can actually like experience and emotionally connect to some sort of feature. So not ones that are kind of behind the mechanical room, or ones that might be on an ESG report. People tend to remember features that visibly improve their day-to-day experience. So like natural light or outdoor spaces, or things that kind of spark curiosity. So like pollinator habitats, or again, we have beehives. So when we give tours of our building, right, our beehives spark the most curiosity. It creates this immediate connection point and conversation starter. And so, and at that point, sustainability all of a sudden becomes tangible and almost approachable rather than abstract. And so because we have hives, we're able to kind of share honey with our guests. And that really becomes this powerful connection and memory of our space, because it's something people can taste and can share. And so, it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like breaking bread with someone, but by proxy through our bees. And that's such a vulnerable and communal experience. So at the end of the day, memorable sustainability is usually participatory. And the buildings that tend to stand out are really the ones that can help people not just benefit from sustainability, but really actively feel connected to it. So that's just from on the ground how we've been able to translate what LEED sets up as this wonderful framework, right? To then say, how can we make this a visceral thing that folks want to keep doing? Because things, are not sustainable unless people keep sustaining them, unless people keep doing it. So we try and do that.
It's easy. I love, by the way, how you described the beehive and that, that first point of connection, and how it is in some properties like a conversation opener whenever you have a beehive on site, to other sustainability initiative that your building may have as well too, and how you commit to LEED or other certifications, so on and so forth. The process of reporting, I think, and has been maybe not giving it a bad rep to certification, but it is sometimes heavy. And I think Ryan touched upon that earlier, of how LEED, the organization, and especially in this B5, we're looking at the process. Can you touch a bit on that as well too, and how hopefully it's easier not only for organization or people, owning the program internally, to not only report, but also, because it's time taken away to report on those initiatives, and also, make it feel to tenants, or even communicating to tenants, and the tools that you're seeing coming or that exist, for anyone in the room who is a LEED member or is planning to be maybe in the future. Like, what tools are you giving to them to maybe ease the reporting phase of LEED certification?
Yeah, I think that stems from just the design of the rating system itself, and that's certainly something, nobody likes to document things, right? Like it's not always the funnest part of it, and I think that organizationally we would rather people be focusing on doing the good work and not getting trapped in filling out forms and things like that. That said, going back to transparency and accountability, there is a need for reporting, right? So we're looking at how we can streamline that and make it easier, and the tools that are behind it. So we've launched, those of you who have done LEED in the past, we had something called LEED Online, which is where you document and do all that good stuff and assemble your team. We've built a new platform called ARC. And this is part of that story of bridging between design, construction, and operations. You can work across the life cycle of that building. So you might have a building that's designed and constructed, and you certify it, and you put your information in there. But then you have reporting tools to track energy and water and waste and all of these metrics, and be able to communicate them, because that's really where I think it becomes real for the occupants, is to say, okay, yeah, we did this building, but like projected energy use versus like actual energy use is different. And going back to my story about our space, that's a learning opportunity for us, because we can, Stephen knows this from his work on the facility side. It's like best intentions, love all the designers who are on the call and whatnot, but like best intentions in design don't always translate into reality, right? So
Yeah.
how can you communicate and make that story of what you did part of the daily life of the people in that space and have them help to contribute to make it a better space? And so some of the tools that we're looking at is like, well, how do you then continually give that feedback through the operations side of things? And I'm sure that that's just from the lead perspective, right? There's so many cool
Absolutely.
tools out there, of course, and maybe I'll throw it back at Stephen on his side, so for some practical tools that he may have as the facility manager.
Yeah, and thank you. I did not mean to raise my hand. I meant to give you the clap thing when you had said sometimes the best intentions, because there are, and I think I shared this story at Greenbuild. You can have the best intention building the architect to say, if you were going to install this solar panel and you have to get up there every Tuesday and scrub it at a 45-degree angle, and it's going to work perfectly forever. And we're like, that's never going to happen. So just to be honest, from the FM side, it's like let's all get in a room and ensure that it's a long-term success. But in terms of tools, yes, as you mentioned, Ryan, just trying to streamline the process. So ARC, which has been great in terms of reporting, it also has all of these tools for folks to use. It connects easily to Energy Star Portfolio Manager as well as other apps to really make tracking less arduous. I am always confused on how difficult it seems to get folks to just track energy, but then I also have a bread maker in my cabinet that you just put in five ingredients, press the button, and it makes beautiful bread. That thing has been sitting in my cabinet for 3 years. I don't know why I cannot just take it out and I just go to the store and buy bread. So I get it. Anyway, so those are the great tools that Lead makes it even easier in order for you to do better. And so thank you for that question, Naomi, to get folks on board to see about getting their
I was
building
gonna ask
certified.
you, how do you report, but the tool, but Ryan, you were faster than me on that front.
Yeah,
And
and I should mention that if ARC, just arc.gbc, arc.gbci.org, you can see it right there. It's not just for lead buildings, right? So like any building can actually use it. There's even a function for an entire portfolio. So let's say that you have a portfolio of buildings and you're doing one thing. Uh, let's say you're looking at your energy or your carbon across that portfolio, or you're looking at I don't know. Let's say you have a metric of um beehives on 100% of your properties, right, across your portfolio. And you want to verify that, right? Like we can verify that at a portfolio scale or down to, the individual building scale. There's certificates for performance
yep.
at a micro level outside of that. And the basic system to use is free. So I encourage everyone to check it out if you're looking for something to use.
Oh, thank you for the resource. We'll share that resource afterward with everyone in the room and in the email. Um, our last segment here before we open up to the Q&A, and this one is for Stephen, like core and shell project team. Like sometimes they have limited influence on how occupants or tenant spaces are fit out. How do you get occupants of the building or building community to participate in your sustainability project? Are they involved in like getting those initiative in? Basically, we've seen that some tenants or some occupiers will have more influence than other, once they move in. So how do you navigate this, and what's been your experience on the field about that?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the biggest opportunities in commercial real estate, just because, even the highest performing buildings ultimately depend on the people inside it to really fully realize its sustainability goals. And
Yeah.
so, core and shell teams may not control every tenant fit out decision, but at least in my opinion, they absolutely influence the culture and the experience of the building once people move in. And so where this is done, right, is when sustainability starts to become this shared experience or this communal experience, rather than something that is kind of managed solely by facilities or ESG teams. And so that can really start with a simple mindset shift of you can't mandate culture. You have to invite participation. And so that doesn't have to be through massive investments, right? Sometimes it's just, relatively simple things like visible indoor air quality, transparency, or community events, or really regular human-centric storytelling campaigns around building initiatives that start to make sustainability feel more approachable and relevant to daily life. At the end of the day, tenants are far more likely to participate in sustainability when they feel like contributors rather than compliance targets. And so the question to me becomes, it becomes less how do we control tenant behavior and more how do we create conditions where sustainable behaviors feel easy and visible and worth participating in.
Wow. Ryan, do you have anything to? I thought you were going to say something.
I'm just going to say, like, one of the things that Stephen's saying inherently here that I'm noticing is, like, oftentimes we leave the sustainability stuff to the sustainability people, right? And I think there's enough people that care about it. They may not care about everything. They might, there might be the people that like that boiler room and they want to get in there and do whatever. But then there's the people that just want to take care, in your case, and they want to help with the bees and they want to, do that, or they want to help reduce waste. Like, there are people who care about certain things, and will be champions within that building. And so we do see a lot of tenant engagement from folks where they'll have teams internally that are across the organization from totally different fields. They're not the the sustainability geeks. They are just people who care about their place and their space, and how do we kind of empower that ethic. I think I remember, I can't remember exactly the words you used, Stephen, but it's like empowering the people, because at the end of the day, we just like to be in good spaces. So, hey, everybody can contribute.
I love where that conversation is heading. We have to soon open the floor to a question, and hopefully the folks in the room have some question. I already see one in the chat here. Maybe a final question to both of you from your experience, great experience. What's the ingredient or the secret ingredient that makes sustainability feature actually stick with tenants, and pun intended?
Oh, you stopped. I don't know if Stephen has anything. I mean, like, I'm gonna be honest with you. Some of the things they do need to be automated, right? Like, there are certain things that you have to rely on technology because humans, they forget about things, or it's not their priority, or they got 1,000 other things. So the more you can automate certain things that are going to have a result, and then the second side is empowering people beyond, the folks that are officially responsible for that space, empowering them to chip in. It could be as simple as, if you've got a health initiative, and this is certainly outside of the, the LEED context, but like, okay, how do, you start the healthy buildings team, and it's, people maybe organizing around, let's get steps in. Here, like, let's take a break, let's take a mental break, or let's bring in snacks, but let's make sure they're healthy snacks, right? People can focus on that, and that's part of the larger equation as well. So, like, finding ways to make people make those spaces better, I think, augments and goes beyond anything that's in the system, and leave all the stuff that you have to think about and is routine, like, leave that for automation and whatnot.
I hear a lot of communication, and I think that's super important, like on-site and in inbox or so on and so forth. And that's through automation that you can make that happen. Stephen, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, what makes sustainability or even certification something people will talk about from your experience at Southface.
Yeah, I think to go back to one of your earlier questions about what's broken, I think one of the things that's broken is in our bubble is the storytelling component, and we get caught up in our own heads and our own circles and use jargon that no one resonates with or even turns folks off. But I try to approach, anyone. It's like nobody hates the environment, right? Even the most right-wing hunter wants clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, affordable energy. It's just when you say sustainability, they either think rich yuppie from Silicon Valley or they think smelly hippie. And so it's like, how then do we get out of our box and use stories to resonate with folks? And so in terms of tenants, if they can't explain the sustainability features in their building in their own words, then that's a missed opportunity for this to resonate beyond the folks who just geek on what's behind the door in the mechanical room. So that's what makes sustainability stick, is just what is going to stick, pun intended, with the folks who are going to talk about it, right? Are they interested in bees? Well, let's keep promoting that. Are interested in composting? Let's keep talking about that. And how can we put a human-centric element in everything we start to talk about, so folks start to get what that impact is, versus, if you don't do this, the polar ice caps are going to melt. I've never been there. I don't even like being cold, so I don't know what that means. But if you tell me you're going to take my beehives away, then I'm going to fight you. I'll probably lose. However, they're like my pet. So again, that is something that connects with me in a way. And so we need to be better about connecting with folks on their terms, meeting people where they are, and being better storytellers to help folks be better advocates for the work that we're doing.
Wow, I don't think I could have had like a better advocate for bees than you, Stephen, on this call. Um, uh,
My hive's on, right?
I
So
know you have your
yeah.
eyes on. I've noticed before. Amazing. With all of that said, we can open the floor to questions from folks online. If you guys have any question, we're all ears to answer them. And outside of this, so here there's a Q&A little space at the bottom that you can write your question. You can put them in the chat if you may. Before people to warm up.
There was one question in there, and I answered it, but just somebody asked if this is reportable for GBCI credits for lead credentials or otherwise. We did not get this pre-approved, but it's now pushing up at 50 minutes, so it should be worth an hour, and you can self-report that for your credential maintenance. I put my email address in there too. You shouldn't have any problems, but we can follow up with a description or anything like that you need for reporting.
Great. Any more question in the room? Well, we're going to leave that open. Stephen, while people are warming up maybe with their question, I had a question for you on how do you survey, people in your building or your community about all those initiatives? Is there, what do you do that is on the ground tactics to make sure they know that they have a beehive or they like the beehive? Or I'm using the beehive as an example because it's an easy one, but and maybe even Ryan, what have you seen? A great example that you've seen on site of like how, from a property teams, facility teams, like, engaging with the tenants about anything in the certification.
Yeah, I'll going back to kind of the available tools. I believe ARC has I want to say indoor environmental quality survey that you can email to, I want to say anyone, but primarily tenants. And that actually is a really great and easy way for folks to just report on a scale of 1 to 10 on certain features. So that's one of the primary things that we use annually. But then off of that, we'll do surveys, and just to depending on the audience, because we want to see what is working. And as Ryan says, you're always learning. This is a moving ship, and USGBC is good at raising the floor, but they can only do that if they understand what folks are going to gravitate towards. But I would start with ARC, because that again is a great, easy tool to use in order to gauge how folks feel about their indoor environment.
Yeah,
Love
I've
this work.
seen in certain places, you see it in airports, like you walk into the bathroom and there's like a smile, it's like a
Mhm.
smile or a frown or whatever. That's kind of what art does. It literally has a smile. And if it's anything less than like kind of a little bit of a smile, you have to say why, right? So you're giving feedback, which is great. But we've seen it in bigger ways where there might be a QR code in certain areas of like, tell us about this or tell us about that. Not being a facility manager like Stephen, I I have seen others that maybe aren't as open to that feedback maybe as Stephen. And so that might be a bit of intrepidation, right? But it's like it goes
Mhm.
back to this idea of transparency and when you know, you can do something about it, right? It doesn't mean that you have to answer all of those issues or whatnot, but you can get that feedback and that can help you to prioritize and whatnot, which I think can be helpful to some extent.
Ryan, I remember it's a question that was asked by one of our client here. We're talking about certification on Lead V5 may seem more accessible to new builds, but it also, you were mentioning in our call this example of like it doesn't have to do with new builds. Can you expand a little bit more about that for folks who are overseeing properties
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
are not brand new? They were born the same years as I was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the bread and butter and the kind of focus of LEED has really been on the design and construction side, and that's fabulous, right? Because so many decisions are made in design and construction that have an impact over the life of the building, but the operational savings and the health impacts and all of that happen over the life of the building. So we've certainly raised the bar across every time we do a new version of LEED, we raise the bar. And in some cases that bar is on the design and construction side recognizes the fact that there are things that you can do in design and construction that you can only do in design and construction. So we have expectations there. The idea with operations and maintenance is actually to open the doors more so that more buildings can participate. Because if we want to address these global issues, we should do it with the existing buildings that are already there, right? There's so
Mhm.
much pent-up opportunity. And so LEED for existing buildings shows leadership in a different way, right? So instead of saying, hey, we have to be this extremely high performing building, if you think of Energy Star, we've got to have an Energy Star score of 70 or above on a scale of 100. We actually want you to show that you've made a marked improvement, right? So you might have a lower performing building that I'll just use Energy Star because I can think on a scale of 0 to 100, but you go from a 10 to a 50, that's huge. Like the energy savings, the carbon reduction and whatnot, that's really big, right? And that in and of itself is leadership, right? Like you've taken something from being low performing to be a higher performing and made an impact. So we define leadership in a slightly different way. And the idea there is that more of these existing buildings, which are the majority of the buildings that are there because they already exist, that they can participate through LEED for operations and maintenance. And then if you're doing a new build, of course, we want you to focus on the things that you can get there. And I think that the spectrum of performance under design and construction has also changed. I'll just say briefly, for a platinum building, there's certain things that you have to do, not just get a certain number of points, but you have to, have high amounts of efficiency and electrification and embodied carbon reductions and all these things. You have to meet certain credits. So we're certainly thinking about leadership in both cases, but in different ways about, really one is about setting up for the future and the other one is about more participation to move the market.
Mhm. Thank you. That's great because we had this question, a recurring question about that about that. And since maybe we have the question in the Q&A or in the chat. Uh, thanks for Kevin. Excellent panel conversation. Thank you, Kevin. We thank you. And there's one question, or maybe this one. Okay, we have someone that is asking a question in the Q&A. For buildings with a LEED BD plus C certification that is a 5 or more years old, what ongoing education and engagement strategies such as tours, surveys, or similar approaches can be implemented to keep facility staff and sustainability teams continuously informed and active around the original certification credit? Great question. Ooh.
I can talk about that from a structural side, and I'd love to hear Stephen from the practical side on that. I mean, so as I said, BD&C stands for Building, Design, and Construction. So all the design and construction stuff, that plaque is a stamp in time, right? And so that's where operations and maintenance comes, versions of the rating system come into play. And we have actually recertification. So I've seen buildings, I did plaque presentations for some buildings. I'm based in Washington, D.C., in this region, that were certified under older versions of LEED, at the silver level, and then they recertified under newer versions of LEED through operations and maintenance, which newer means higher standard. As well, they bumped up their certification level, right? So they went from, say, silver under an older version to gold under a newer version, which has higher energy requirements and things like that. So this is, not just to plug this idea of recertification every, theoretically every 3 to 5 years, but by doing that, it continues to hold that high standard and keep people engaged. The tools like ARC you can utilize to engage and get that feedback and kind of track where you are and see where your building lines up. Even if it's not a LEED certified building, you can kind of see like how LEED ready is it, and put the information in there and see how it stacks up against LEED. So I think that those are structural tools to be able to do that. I would also say for those who say, oh, well, we did all these things. We don't need the certification. That's fine if that's a choice you want to make. But you can use this ARC tool also to track and see, well, how does it actually line up now that it's operating against that, and find ways to improve, find ways to keep people engaged, and even, frankly, raise the bar over time. Like, let's make our buildings better. Let's make them work better for us who have to be inside of them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
I'll just piggyback on that. We like to say buildings don't save energy, people do. And so you can have the best performing, or you have the best built building, but it's only going to operate as it should if folks understand how it operates. And that should not just be your FM teams or the folks in charge of certification. That should be everyone who opens the door, opens a window, turns on a light. All of them should understand, again, how their everyday behaviors start to affect how that building operates, and then that's where you start to help them connect the dots between your behavior and the overall building goals. And that's what starts to create that community and culture of sustainability as it goes from its new built phase through its O&M phase. But the tools out there, LEED has a ton of robust tools to help understand how to either maintain or bring up to a certain standard buildings operations. I'll say if you're new to LEED, start small. I think as Ryan said, eat it one bite, take one bite of the elephant at a time, because it can be daunting. But I assure you, like me, I have a music degree and a business degree. I am not an engineer at all, but once I got into this, I was like, this is so cool. I did not know that if I do this, right? If I don't know, whatever it is, if I do this, that there is a downstream effect to it. And that's what gets people excited, because they're like, I did not know that, right? And so that's it. It's having a community of folks who are dedicated to just understanding how the building operates. There's a lot of tools online, and moving from BD&C to an M, as Ryan shared, can be easy, but I'd say do it as early as possible, because the farther away you get from that new build plaque, the harder it's going to be, right? You're going to have a lot of days on the rooftop scrubbing that solar panel that you probably should have been scrubbing for the past, 3 or 4 years.
I think what Stephen is saying as well is it doesn't need to be super complicated. Stephen, if I remember our conversation, like you're a man of many trades, I will say, and you're doing a lot under your own belt through automation, great tools, so on and so forth, to not only keep your community informed, but also to make sure that those initiatives are well aware by the community and are reported back. Great. I think we're close to the 1 hour. So thank you guys for